Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara Riska, life coach, wife, and the mother of 4 incredible and unique kids. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I completely lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and grace that once felt so completely lacking. I started the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves up against what feels impossible. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle the dreams that you hold impossible now. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you're a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. This week's episode is a conversation that I had with a all-around incredible human being. If you're in the United States, we have the honor of having a veteran, somebody that has served the country in the capacity of her expertise, which is being not just a normal pharmacist, but a doctoral pharmacist. I hope I said that right. Basically, this woman is an all-around. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. This week's episode is with Robyn Cortese, and you're going to absolutely fall in love with her. I probably said that every time. I actually love every single episode, especially I get to still edit. Which I might have to change soon, all of the episodes. And so I get to have the conversation and then I get to listen to the conversation again. And Robyn is a doctorate of pharmacy who's been practicing as a clinical pharmacist with a focus in pediatrics for 8 years. She's an Air Force veteran with a Commendation Medal. She's also a Navy wife. I mean, don't you feel like I should have cued the Top Gun music when I started this episode? I don't think that would be legal, but that would have been so much fun. Okay, she's a mom to 2 amazing boys. Her youngest son, Michael, has a rare genetic condition. She calls it a misspelling, and I'm sure the geneticists do too. Right now, it's so rare that only 2 syndromes have been discovered on this particular gene. And she's going to go and tell us all about the condition in the episode. But I think what you're going to find with Robyn is that she's new to this journey because her son's only 2. But what she's done is she's applying her training from the military to bring such insight and wisdom. And I just really feel like there's just a very fun tone about this episode where we both know that, as Robyn and I talk, like there are a lot of real obstacles in the way of what we might want for our children. But the outlook and even just the tone of her language, to me, was really refreshing and very empowering. And I mean, I think at one point in the episode, I was like, I'm going to go enlist, because the way that she describes what she got to do and the training that she got, it just was very attractive. And I know you're going to really get a lot of value from this episode. It's like packed with stuff. And so you might have to break it up into a couple episodes, because there's so much for you to digest and to take from this episode. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's welcome Robyn to the show. Robyn, I am so excited to have this conversation with you, and I might have to stop myself from the temptation of asking you all of my pharmaceutical questions, and I will restrain myself, but I'm really excited for the Special Needs Mom podcast community to get to know you and just to share in community with you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kara. I am used to pharmacy questions, so feel free to interject at any moment. I think it's my reflex to respond and answer. So,
well, there was that time mid-pandemic where one of my son's medications, hydrocortisone, which is essential for life for him, they're like, yeah, we can't get that one right now. Yeah, right. You like know about this, right? And so I'm like, this
oh my gosh. I don't understand. Why?
I know. It's like, this is not okay. And it was just one of those things where I knew it was going to be okay. I was like, I will find a way. But I mean, like, anyhow.
I was actually listening to one of your previous podcasts, and a mom talked about how her son had lost hearing because of the antibiotics that he was on. And as I'm listening to her words, but I'm immediately like, oh, it was vancomycin. They must have dosed it too high. I'm like immediately going through all of my pharmacy reflex, my career reflex kicked in. And so it was just really funny you can't take it out of me, I guess.
Well, it's like when people start talking about like plants or flowers, like it's almost like I know this other language because my background was in horticulture, and I know a lot about plants and flowers. Let's just say it. Anyhow, but not for this podcast. This is not a gardening podcast.
You could turn into one. I love gardening too.
I know. I'm going to start incorporating more pictures of plants on my Instagram feed because I like them. Anyhow, I would love to hear a little bit more about your story, how you became a special needs mom.
Yes. So I have 2 sons. Let me tell you a little bit about me.
I like that too.
So we'll get into it. I am a doctorate of pharmacy. I'm a clinical pharmacist, and I am also an Air Force veteran. I was an Air Force pharmacist for 3 years, and for the last 5 years, I have been a pediatric pharmacist in a hospital. And my husband was active duty Navy, and he recently retired, and so that's what brought us to San Diego. We have kind of moved all over and been a bunch of different places and kind of been nomads for a while. And San Diego is an amazing location with beautiful sunshine tax that we pay. And so we decided to stick around. We have 2 amazing children. My oldest son, Marcus, is 3.5. And he was textbook. He was completely textbook. Every book I read, everything, he would hit the milestone. If it said at 4 weeks, he's going to roll over, at 3.9 weeks, he rolled over.
Ahead of the curve, it sounds like.
Yes, like he is 3.5 years old and was potty trained at 2. I mean, he literally is like textbook everything. And then Tony deployed when Marcus was 6 weeks old, and so he missed he had 6 weeks of infant babe, true newborn baby, and he forgot it immediately because he was deployed and he was in Groundhog's Day, and that life took over. And when he came home, he had this 9-month-old that was saying mama, papa, and getting ready to walk, getting ready to have teeth. He had some teeth. So yeah, he kind of missed all of the little milestones. Then we got pregnant, as most military families do. And when you come home from a deployment, that's like the second step. And so we had Michael, and Michael, it was not a difficult pregnancy, but he always measured small. And so I was going in for extra scans, and nobody was really concerned. It's just Michael was measuring small. And when he was born, he was only 4 pounds, 14 ounces, but he was full term. And so he was small, not even 5 pounds.
One of my children was over double that, just that.
Yeah. And Marcus,
actually, all of mine were. I had what was he, 10 pounds? I had a 10-pound baby, 10 pounds, 5 ounces.
That's it.
I feel like I deserve an award.
Good one. That is literally a bowling trophy.
I know. I have twins. I'm like, I had one child that was bigger than both of your children together.
Combined. Yes.
Okay.
And so I work in the NICU a lot. And so I wasn't shocked. That weight didn't scare me. Nothing about like any of this up to this point kind of scared me or made me nervous. But while we were Michael was an emergency C-section. And so we were in the post-anesthesia recovery room, the PACU, and Michael had an apnea episode. Because babies, and this is very common too, babies just don't know how to breathe yet, right? They've been inside the womb and they don't have exposure to air. And so this is their first time, and they it's common to have an apnea episode. So they took him for observation, and Tony went with Michael, and we kind of had this discussion with both boys that if anything ever happened, like I wanted Tony to be with Michael, not with me, or Marcus, not with me, because I would be okay. And so Tony went with Michael and went for observation, and he had a second apnea episode. And so they decided to admit him to the NICU. And I still was not concerned at this point. I was kind of like, oh, the nurses got it. I have one extra night not being a mom of two, even though I'm a mom of two. I just really had this like carefree moment about it. Then the next morning, they told me Michael wasn't gaining weight. He really hasn't had hunger cues yet. And they use this phrase that to this day I hate. It makes my skin crawl. It immediately brings out the mama bear in me. But Michael has a small chin, or was born with a small chin. And one of the nurses said he has dysmorphic features. Mm-hmm. And I about killed her. How dare you say anything like that about my beautiful, perfect baby boy? Mm-hmm. And so Tony immediately suggested that maybe I go get a shower.
He's like, whoa, we got to get this baby back in the cage.
And so my OB nurse took me upstairs, and I took a moment away, and they decided to run a genetic test on Michael called a microarray. And we wouldn't have the results for a few weeks, maybe even a month. And so we just kind of sat back, and I just stewed on this diagnosis and how dare this woman say this about my child. And I just kind of let it fester and did a lot of things that I shouldn't do. But as a mom, you just are so instinctively protective. And so
especially the day after giving birth.
Like, of course, because say, like, all of the hormones are everywhere.
You're literally programmed to be like, I will kill anybody.
Yes.
No, I mean, not kill. No one's killing anybody here. Just
but yes, that like nature truly takes over, and you truly have those like carnal instincts of this is my baby, and I will do anything to protect it. And so we had several appointments with a pediatrician, and Michael continued to kind of struggle with gaining weight. And so the next diagnosis that I also equally hate was called failure to thrive, because that made me feel so, so terrible. It made me feel like I was the reason Michael was failing to thrive. And so we kind of struggled with that diagnosis. And it's so funny because as a pharmacist, I can be completely clinical. But when it came to Michael and these two diagnoses, I just couldn't separate myself from the clinical words and being his mom. I could not separate those two worlds. So we've gone through a couple of genetic testing. And like I said, the microarray that we did in the NICU actually came back with no definitive answers. And a microarray looks for extra pieces in the genome, or missing pieces in the genome. And it came back with nothing. So this would be a test that would discover you have an extra chromosome and you have Down syndrome, or certain things like that. Or you have a large piece of a gene missing and maybe that's a different syndrome. And there are so many genetic syndromes. Our geneticist decided that maybe we should do something called an exome sequencing, which is they basically look at Michael's entire genome and look at every single spelling letter and see if something is going wrong. And so that test actually turned out that Michael did have a little piece missing from one gene. So it wasn't big enough to detect from the first test because it wasn't such a large piece. But in this test, it did find it. And so actually, Michael literally has one spelling letter, and it changed a C to a T. And that's it. That's the only thing that's different in his genome from mine and from Tony's and from his brothers. It's one letter. And they actually don't have a name for it, because where his misspelling occurs, he's only the fourth person in the world to have a misspelling there. So there are other syndromes on that same gene. And so they've linked him under this syndrome, which is called Rubinstein-Taybi syndrome. And like all genetic syndromes, it has a wide spectrum of conditions and severity. Some cases are extremely severe, where there's like spinal cord tethering. The children that grow into adults have feeding tubes. Some never walk, some never talk. So there's a whole range of and there's also like mental. There can be mental disabilities or intellectual disabilities associated as well. And so you can have a person that is 30 years old, never learned to walk, never learned to talk, and mental age 3. And then you can also have people that are getting ready to go to college on time at 18 years old and maybe have a communication device, or maybe not. Maybe are completely, as other people would say, neurotypical. So this syndrome has a varying range of spectrum, and that makes it encouraging, but it also can make it kind of disheartening, because you just don't know where Michael will fall in that spectrum until we're in it. I guess we are in it.
You are in it. And so how old is Michael right now?
He will be 2 at the end of the week.
He will be 2. Oh my gosh. And I've seen pictures of this little boy, and he's a beauty. And so you are, I mean, just by nature of him only being 2, you are essentially new to the game of being as a special needs mom.
We are.
How do you feel like it's going? Like how would you describe how you're processing it?
I think so. Tony and I are both military. Tony was retired and I'm a veteran. So we have talked a lot about like our training and kind of how our coping process. Coping and resiliency are huge training methodologies in the military. It's something that you at least learn annually. And certainly when you're getting ready to deploy, they kind of amp up those type of trainings. And Tony's a pilot, so it's very different, his training that he received versus my training in the medical profession. Because when Tony would deploy, if there was a plane crash, his plane was shot down, something to that effect. He would be the one in the trauma, or he would be helping those with him in the trauma. Maybe he's fine, but he's helping people in the trauma. And that's sort of his trauma. But as a medical professional, when you're the one deployed, you're the one in the hospital seeing all of the traumas, and you're the one that is taking care of everybody. And some of those aren't always US trauma, like soldier traumas. Some of it is like the person that is the interpreter on base goes home and somebody in the town finds out that they're interpreting for Americans, and they get set on fire, or something catastrophic happens to them. And now we're obviously taking care of that body too, because that's our person. That's still our man out there, or woman. And so you have all of the trauma to kind of take care of as a medical professional. And so my resiliency training was much different than Tony's. But nonetheless, we both received a lot of resiliency training. And so I think that is kind of our reflex. And coping strategies, it's just something that we learned very well. We struggle with the unknown. Tony often reminds me that Michael will do things in Michael time.
Mm-hmm.
I am pretty sure that was the lesson God put me on earth to learn, is to understand Michael time. I'm not a very patient person when I like things to be done.
It reminds me of what I call hospital time. And I'm sure you'll
Yes.
get this, right? It's like, I always say, like, okay, hospital time is how long you think it'll take, and multiply it times 4. Because that time usually then gives you like something that you can kind of wrap your brain around, and not continually get disappointed because you just don't understand why it's taking so long. Anyhow, no knock against our hospital providers. We get it. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yes. Yeah. As one of them, I can attest to that. Usually pharmacy ends up being like the rate limiting step, if you will. We end up being like the bad guy, but it's all the other things that happen until it gets to us, and then we're the last step, and so we end up being the bad guy. But I promise
I don't think so. I mean, obviously you not individually, but you guys do amazing work, and so thank you.
Thank you.
I love the connection that you've made between your training and this resiliency. And even that word, I love that word, resiliency. And I wonder if you can speak. So actually, Robyn has like these 10 amazing points of what her training has provided. So we're going to go through all of them. And then as we have time, we'll kind of elaborate on them. But before we get to the 10 points, I feel like, and maybe you can speak from your training, but I feel like when you think of a trauma, right, there's different parts of it, right? There's the immediate impact of, oh my gosh, we've got to stabilize so that we can kind of like triage, right?
Yes.
And so I feel like in your journey as a special needs mom, like you have stabilized, you've assessed, okay, like what is the impact? What needs to happen? And now you're kind of like, my guess is like transitioning into beyond just the triage and into the next step. And I think that's where a lot of us, and I even look at my own journey of like that triage for me probably lasted about 5 years, in the sense of like figuring out who this new body that now my son had, like what was it? And then like kids do and like bodies do, they grow and change. And so I think that actually we loop back into this like triage point time and time again. And even I was talking to actually one of our past podcast guests yesterday, and she was just saying about how she's just going through more grief, like some things have happened and it's just really hard because things, these kids don't always progress the way we think they could or they should. So,
and I think definitely this COVID season, if you will, has definitely amplified that. I think there were probably a lot of kids that were thriving, or children, kids are goats, children that were thriving and doing well in in-person therapies. I know Michael actually really does well. He's been seeing physical therapy since he was 4 months old, and he did really, really well with in-person appointments. And he's been at daycare with his older brother since he was also 4 months old. And so socialization is amazing. It's an amazing drug. It's an amazing healing
treatment,
outlook.
if you will.
Yeah, treatment. Yeah, it is. Because human connection, I mean, that is what humans need. Humans need connection. And so I think on top of everything that we are as special needs moms going through and processing and grieving, I think having the isolation of COVID has definitely amplified that. And so it's been a struggle for all families. And I think for us kind of going through it, it's kind of our norm, unfortunately. And in some ways, it's been a blessing because Tony has been able to do Zoom appointments with physical therapy and occupational therapy. And so we're using the tools that we have in our house, our own toys. So we don't feel obligated to buy a toy that Michael interacted well with or learned well with. We didn't feel, they would recommend actually to kind of create like a ballet bar or something that Michael could pull to stand. And so Tony, I never thought I would say this, went on Pinterest and found little like a bathroom mirror and built like a little ballet bar that would be equivalent to something Michael would have had at daycare. And he stands up against it all the time and blows raspberries to himself. And like, so, I mean, because that's his only social interaction with another baby. Marcus is not, I mean, he's a full blown toddler. And so Michael didn't have somebody to learn how to stick his tongue out at with. So yeah, I think it's definitely been a difficult season with COVID. And I think grief and going back to that triage phase is just something that's going to constantly happen. A new surgery is going to cause a new triage round. A new medical device would cause a new triage round. So it's definitely, yes, a phase of like coming in and out of that triage. But yeah, for Michael, I think we are very much in the next phases of his care and his progression and seeing where on the spectrum he may lie.
Yeah. And then likewise, your care and your progression as a mom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and I think it's important to point out that right now you are working full time and your husband is home full time. Is that correct? Right. So
Tony does have a couple contract flying jobs and our daycare has reopened. So Tony, is occasionally flying, maybe like 6 or 7 days a month. But for the most part, he is home, home to take Michael to appointments, home to juggle most of the appointments. It's really funny because when it's not a true specialist, all of Michael's appointments are specialists, but when it's neurology or GI or urology or genetics, it's really funny because Tony often says he needs an adult at those type of appointments. So, I guess I'm the adult or the medical, the person that speaks that medical jargon, like you were talking about horticultural jargon earlier.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it speaks to like, I mean, I'm obviously not in the military, nor was I ever. And so this might be like a total blunder, but like, no, man, no, I'm going to mess this up. But like, basically like, don't go in alone, right?
Yeah,
in the sense of like,
behind.
I was thinking that one, but I'm mixing up with another one. I'm like, seriously, I don't even know why I keep trying with these sayings. I always screw them up and I like dig myself in. I'm like, Kara, just stop. Just don't try. Okay. Anyhow.
Try it. Go out.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. I won't give up. I mean, at this point, if I haven't, I'm not going to stop. So let's just be honest.
Precisely.
Let's hear what do we want to call these? Your 10 points of resiliency? Or
your ways to increase your capacity for resiliency.
Oh, I really
think
like
everybody has resiliency. That's also a human nature, but you can always learn to increase your capacity. And grow from it. And no, I don't think there's anyone that's perfect because everyone is going to experience trauma differently. Everyone's going to absorb it differently. And so you just really need to increase your capacity for resiliency.
That is so well said. I'm like so amped up right now because I mean, that is just something that we talk often about in coaching is expanding our capacity in all the areas, to be with something, to process something, to forgive all the things, right? It's all about expanding our capacity that we already have. So let's get into it. So number 1, take care of your body. Talk to me a little bit about this one.
Yes. So obviously in the military, this is very easy because physical training is part of our day. At the end of the workday, we would still go out as a team and go run 5 miles or do I don't know, 100 push-ups or
Oh
whatever.
my gosh.
I mean, maybe as a team, I don't think I ever got that high.
I was like, wow, I don't know if I would have made the cut there.
You would like we had physical therapy or physical training, and it was always as a team, as our pharmacy team, or Tony always said his shop would go out for a run or things like that. And so that's just every squadron I've ever been a part of, that's just part of it. So it was easy to do it when you were in the military.
I think it's so interesting that was integrated as like the essential part of the day of training for you guys. Not even just training, but like a way of being. I think that's really fascinating. So basically physical, I mean, it's called PT, but like attending to your body was the norm. So that's kind of point one, right?
We called it physical readiness. Yeah.
Oh, that's even better. I'm like, I'm ready to go enlist right now. Okay, let's go on to number 2. And wow, you have to pull me back. Okay. Avoid negative outlets. Tell me about that.
So again, in the military, this is usually drugs and alcohol. And so you're avoiding that because you are, no matter what your career field is, you're going to get drug screened. And especially in the pharmacy or in the hospital, we would maybe do it more frequently than maybe somebody that does cybersecurity or security forces or a pilot. Actually, pilots probably get tested quite often too. Yeah, so just avoiding negative outlets. So that's not to say you have to be completely sober. Of course, have a glass of wine at dinner, but don't do it if you know you're going on the night shift. Don't take it to an extreme. Don't drink and drive. And that could be anything. Lately, it's been don't doom scroll. Tony has often told me at night, put your phone down, because I was finding myself in this negative outlet of like, oh, the world is a horrible place right now and there's nothing good going on. And now I was walking down the street yesterday. Actually, our children are at the federal building for their daycare, and the flags were at half mast. And I looked to myself like, who died? What is going on? And then I realized the flags were at half mast because we reached 500,000 COVID deaths.
Oh, I actually had been meaning to Google that because I've been driving around seeing the same thing. I was like, what did I miss? Like, I was like, I want to know why this is. Oh, wow. That is.
So it was kind of a sobering moment when I figured that out too, because we've been in this for a year and it's a negative. At first it was kind of not to be weird or morbid, but as a pharmacist, I was excited about it because it meant all new vaccine development. It meant new technology going into medicine. Medicine was highlighted for the year. And healthcare workers were heroes. I was pumped. I was a little bit excited about what was going to happen. But now we've been in it a year, and then the luster of that gold bar has kind of worn off, and it's getting a little bit, I don't know, the luster is just worn off. So yeah, we're still in it. And so my negative outlet now is avoiding doom scrolling. But yes, in the military, it was easy to say, don't drink and drive. Don't do these things that you shouldn't do.
Brilliant. And number 3 is helping others.
Yes, that's probably my favorite and most actually reflexive. I have been helping others. I mean, my mom is a primary care doctor. My dad is a pharmacist. So altruism has been part of my upbringing. We grew up in Pittsburgh. Tony and I both did. And I don't know if you're familiar with Fred Rogers, but he often...
Oh, Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, not basically, I love him.
He is a Pittsburgh icon. The show is actually filmed in Pittsburgh. When I was little, my parents actually took me to a taping of
No way.
the Rogers neighborhood.
That is a truly like brag-worthy moment. That's amazing.
Yeah, actually, this is my coffee mug is Mr. Rogers neighborhood. So,
oh my gosh.
We always have it in our house. But there's a phrase called look for the helpers. And Tony and I often say it to each other, and we often say it to Marcus, and hopefully Michael is starting to hear it and understand it as well. So we have encouraged our boys to also be helpers, especially Marcus. And he has embraced it wholeheartedly, probably because we both were in the military. And so by default, we're helpers. But he loves to help Michael. He loves to help bring me a diaper when I'm changing his diaper. He loves to help Michael stand up when he's trying to reach for a toy. I mean, it's just really amazing to see your children become little helpers or become great people, learning how to become really amazing people. And I'm hoping that Michael will also follow Marcus's lead and also be equally amazing.
Well, I'm sure with following you and Tony's lead, he has a lot of really close up role models. So I have no doubt that that will be the case.
I hope so.
Tell me about number 4, be proactive.
So being proactive in the military is kind of, you see a problem, you take care of it. You don't really ask permission to fix it. You just kind of go ahead and fix it. And then if you find out later along the way that, hey, we did it this way for a certain reason, then you can backtrack and go on from there. So for us, for resiliency, we're just trying to be proactive with Michael's care. We don't actually know if he is going to have Robyn-Cortese syndrome and that's what he falls under, or will he, Tony has a call sign as a pilot. It's Tony Pepperoni. Marcus has a call sign. He's Mac Attack. And so Michael's call sign is Michael Motorcycle. And so we always say, will this be Michael Motorcycle syndrome or will this be Robyn-Cortese? And so we're just trying to be proactive and kind of follow the guidelines of Robyn-Cortese and what to look out for. Glaucoma is a big thing. So every time he goes to the ophthalmologist, we have them check. Cardiac issues are a big thing. And so he's had he has an annual cardiology exam because of that. And everything is normal, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to like sit back and say, woohoo, it's normal. No, I want to make sure that every year we're checking for those things because at any point I know that they can develop and I know that things can change with your body. And maybe that's the medical side of me can take that, going back to that triage. I don't need to process that a lot because I've triaged it. And so I can move on faster than maybe another person like Tony who has 0 medical training. And so he does need to process it a little bit more, but he also has the trust that I'm good. And if I'm good, then we can move forward. We very much are a team in that aspect. So not that he lets me take the lead, but that he trusts that when I say we can go forward, that he trusts that my leadership is there.
That's amazing. And the call signs, I love that so much. And it just keeps coming up for me. There was the episode with Robyn. The name of the episode was No Name, No Limits. And I loved, so her son too had a very rare, I believe it was genetic disorder. And for her, that meant there was no limits to what he could achieve or couldn't achieve.
I like that.
And it was like brilliant. And so as I'm continuing to talk to different moms like you, where it's like, oh yeah, it could mean this, it could mean that. Like the power of just saying, like, it doesn't matter what it could be. Like, let's just like decide that there's no limits because of it.
Yeah.
And of course, there might be some obstacles, and then you get another chance to decide.
Yeah. And I mean, that's life, right? Life is full of obstacles. So whether you have a neurotypical child or a child with special needs, obstacles are going to occur. A broken arm is an obstacle. A broken leg is an obstacle.
13-year-olds are obstacles. Just kidding.
Yes.
Just kidding.
The teenager phase is real, and that's an obstacle.
Oh, that's so funny. Number 5, look for opportunities for self-discovery.
And in the military, this is always easy to decide or define too, because they often encourage volunteerism in the community. And it kind of goes back with like being helpful. So when I worked at my previous base was Keesler Air Force Base in the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, was an area hit hard by Katrina. Actually, the eye of the storm went over Gulfport, Mississippi and Biloxi, Mississippi. So they had a lot of storm damage, just a hard hit area. Communities were not rebounded fully. I think a lot of people were afraid to rebound. Business owners were afraid to rebuild. And so there tended to be a lot of commercialism, Targets and Walmarts, and you didn't have the mom and pop grocery store. You had only Target or big commercial names. And anyway, I did a lot of volunteer work with helping families that had AIDS and kind of going through all of their HIV medications and helping them sort that out and making sure that they were taking everything, making sure that the other medications that they had weren't interacting. And so it was being proactive to the community, because for that, and also having self-discovery. I don't have HIV and I don't have AIDS. And but making them feel comfortable to like hold their hand and help them sort their medications and help them figure out why this is important and what the medications do, and take the time to translate for them, because their doctor only has 15 minutes and their pharmacist has a massive line at the pharmacy, and nobody has time to sit down and say, this is why you need to take this medicine because it's going to decrease your viral load. This is why you need to take this medicine because it's going to help with your nausea and vomiting. And so, or pain tolerance or whatever the medication is. So I think opportunities for self-discovery is huge, because you're not only helping the community at large, which is obviously going to make the world a better place, but you're helping yourself too, and you're helping yourself help others. And so I always think of the Grinch. Your heart just grows three times as big in those moments.
I love that picture. And I think what I'm really present to when you share this one in particular is that just you using your unique placement of your knowledge of the pharmacy world, but then also that now you have this knowledge of what it's like to be a mom that doesn't have a child that is as expected, and all the knowledge that you're going to be building up over your life and applying then these principles, like the capacity that you have to give back is so much bigger than it would have been had you not served in the military, but then also not been the mom to the children that you are. So I don't know. I'm just like really connected to like how amazing that is, and that how it works. And that for everybody listening, you probably aren't a pharmacist, but
I recognize that.
But that whatever it is that you brought into this and how you're uniquely gifted and able to be with it, like then you can then go give that and teach other people, because that's how we learn, right? We learn from seeing other people and what they do. So, okay, I'm going to stop talking. Number 6, move toward goals.
So moving towards goals, I think everybody kind of sets goals for themselves, or I hope they do. That is something people should do. Have something to look forward to, have something that they're working towards, whether that's I want to save $100 in my savings account to I want Michael to walk before he is supposed to. For Robyn Cortese, the average age for walking is 30 months, and the average age for verbal communication is 5 years old. So we are currently working with Michael on, he pulls to stand, and we have a coffee table that he loves to walk around and cruise around. But if he is tempted to come to take steps towards Mama, who is only but 3 feet away from the coffee table, he is completely hesitant and does not want, he's nervous. I could tell that he is uncertain of his balance. He is my extremely cautious child. And so he, is just nervous about taking those steps. But we know that the average age for walking is 30 months, and we kind of keep that in perspective, which is another one of our ways to increase capacity. Actually, that's the next one, 7. Keep things in perspective. Sorry, I'm going to jump ahead. But yes, we can keep that in mind and keep that as our guideline. But we work towards those goals, and we move towards those goals, and we get him to walking, and hopefully we can get him to talking. And if it happens at 30 months, or it happens at 31 months, or it happens next week when he turns 2 at 24 months, we have been celebrating every milestone, and we share that celebration with him. And we also make it a celebration with Marcus, and keeps us as a team and a family. And we just really try to, not only move towards those goals, but keep things in perspective.
Brilliant. Okay, number 8, accept change.
And this is also one that we can kind of elaborated on that too. if Michael doesn't meet his goals or something changes and he steps backwards, so far we've been very fortunate that Michael has never gone backwards in any of his therapies or any of his capabilities, but he has certainly plateaued a few times. And then we just keep moving towards those goals, but we accept that he's plateaued and maybe step back, assess what's going on. Maybe it was his favorite daycare teacher has been out for a week because she had the flu. And so, or hopefully not COVID. And so maybe that's the change that has caused a plateau, or maybe he's getting tired of a certain toy and that's the only toy we have. And so we have to advance his cognitive development. And so you just have to accept the change, and life is an ever-changing world. Nothing is ever going to stay the same. Change is probably one of the hardest things for people to accept in general. It's easy with the military because if Uncle Sam says, hey, you're going to Juneau, Alaska, guess what? You're going to Juneau, Alaska. If Uncle Sam says, hey, you're moving to San Diego, guess what? You're moving to San Diego. So by default, you just have no choice in accepting that change.
Do you feel like being in the military like you were and just accepting those types of changes that are big life changes, right? Like, I don't know that I would be able to like handle that the same way. Do you feel like that practicing of accepting change really helped you when you
I think so, for sure.
in this journey?
Yeah, I think that change became our default, actually. This is our first home. This is our first put pictures on the wall because we're here long enough to enjoy them. Paint the walls because you get to pick whatever paint color you can put on. This is our first home, and Tony just retired. So yes, I think that change was our default this whole entire time. And so it is easier in the military. I don't know that it's easier, actually. I think it is equally as difficult for everybody. It just happens so much more frequently that you either accept it or you don't. And I think that there are a lot of people that's the reason they get out of the military, because they do want to settle down. They do want a permanent life. This nomadic life is just not working for their needs anymore, whether it's that they want to have a family, maybe they're in school and they want to finish that degree and they don't want to move to, I don't know, Great Falls, North Dakota. They want to stay in Jacksonville, Florida. I don't know. The locations are so broad and so ever changing, but yes, I think that is maybe it makes it more easier. That's a terrible word. It just makes it easier.
Well, I think it's like you said earlier, like you're like, maybe it's not easier. It's just, I don't remember exactly what you said, but as I was listening, it was like, it just seemed, yes, that's it. It was more frequently. So when you do something more frequently, you do get better at it. Like in the sense of like, it doesn't make it easy, but you also like when you do something, you have the confidence that you can do it. It's what I talk about all the time. So if you've listened to my podcast, you're going to hear me always talking about practicing. But it's not about like nailing anything the first time. And especially when we're doing something for the first time, it feels the hardest. And all of these experiences that often we're having as special needs moms, like usually it's the first time. Like it's not like we're every day getting diagnoses or coming across the challenges that we have. So let's keep going. Let's do number 9, learn from the past.
Learn from your past. And I think that this is, obviously I've been reflecting on all of my past. So it's easy to do that. But even with Michael, we have stepped back and learned what works and what doesn't work. And even raising a 3.5-year-old, you learn what works and what doesn't work, whether it's communicating to them and you find that repeating no, 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 no doesn't work. But if you sit down and ask, why are you doing that? It makes the toddler turn around and say, this is why I'm doing it. And it could be simple as there's a bug there and I didn't notice, or I don't like the color green, or whatever the toddler feels like saying. So learning from your past can obviously happen in any phase, in any life, whether you have neurotypical children, whether you're a parent or not a parent, whether you have special needs children or not. If you don't learn from your past, you're bound to relive it. That's a phrase that we often hear in history. If you don't learn from
Mm-hmm.
history, you're going to repeat it. And so I think that it's true. It definitely rings true. If you're never going to learn what errors you're making or what keeps you on a poor decision path, then you're never going to correct it or steer into a good decision path. So it's definitely something that takes time, and you have to reflect on yourself, and that can be very, very difficult for people, especially if you have your own demons that you work through. If you have a depression or an anxiety and come from a poor relationship, live in a home with a poor relationship, grew up in a home with a poor relationship, these are not things that are uncommon. These are very common situations, especially like we've talked about in this past season, where you're isolated, and that can just be a difficult thing to like look inside yourself and reflect. But if you don't learn from your past, like we said, you're never going to be able to correct it or move forward.
I think you said that so well. I'm going to just add in a little bit here
Yes.
from an evaluation process that I find so simple, so effective, and just easy to remember. So, with this point number 9, learn from your past, I think what Robyn's saying is kind of look back. And the 3 questions that you can ask is what worked, what didn't work, and what will I do differently? So it really allows you to like objectively look back and be like, okay, that did not work. And kind of be like, okay, and just, explore why. And then really make a couple decisions right there in that moment to decide what you will do differently. And maybe the what you'll do differently is more of like a way of being that you're going to bring to it, like being less attached to the outcome. It can be specific, like I will speak calmer. I mean, there's a variety of ways that you can decide what you're going to do differently in the future. But I think that's a really effective way of doing an evaluation when looking at the past. So let's do this last number. And it's like I always want to say everyone's my favorite, but this number 10 might be my favorite. Number 10, seek help when you need it.
I think this is my most difficult one.
Mm.
I think that's because I tend to view myself as the helper and not the helped. And so that has been very, very, very difficult for me as a special needs mom, as a mom in general, as a pharmacist, as a woman. It's been very hard for me to ask for help. And oftentimes I make my husband do it because
That's awesome.
he is very good at asking for help, and not because he needs help often. He's just very good at, and maybe that's because he was in the military longer. So you rely on your teammates, and maybe that could be my car is in the shop and I need to get a ride somewhere. Can you help me out? And maybe I think men are just in general, it's easier for them to just throw it out there. I think women tend to, I don't know, maybe that's
I
thing to
agree.
say. Maybe
I
I'm
think
sexist.
no, my husband will like he will make requests of people, or he'll ask like favors or to like borrow stuff that I would never dream of. And I find I get a little like I guess the word's controlling of babe. I don't that's too much to ask. I find myself in these conversations. And it's interesting then when I look back and evaluate, remember that? I really look at like, oh wow, that's interesting. Like my default was to be so uncomfortable with this request, but like there's really nothing wrong with it. Like the person that he's requesting it from, they can just say no. I don't have to try to control the situation. But I think that maybe it is a thing that women are not as good at. I think maybe when this comes out, I'll put out a poll and we'll kind of see what other women and what other mothers have to say about this.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, I know, right? Why do you think so? Okay, so what areas of your life do you find that you have the hardest time asking for more help in?
I definitely think when it comes to asking for help with my boys, like even if it's to the point of, hey, can you babysit, or can you come over so I can go to the grocery store undisturbed? I think I just have a lot of trouble letting go. Maybe I think I should be able to do these tasks. Mothers all over the world take their children to the grocery store. So should I. But at the same time, I also think if they are going to be much happier if they're at home playing with their toys and playing with each other, or even zoning out and watching a cartoon, than they would be stuck in a shopping cart with me in the grocery store. And so it would make an enjoyable experience for everybody. I get the 20 minutes of roaming the aisles and picking out exactly what I want, which cereal I want to have, or which coffee I want to buy, versus grabbing the first one on the shelf because somebody is unhappy with being in the shopping cart. So I think, yes, when it comes to asking for help, I am very difficult. I have a difficult time when it comes to asking for help with my boys.
Well, thank you for owning that and being open enough
Very
to share that. Yes. But I think that actually it's really helpful as us moms in this process, as yes, we are the helpers, because I mean, look what we do for our kids every day, but to actually be also equally the helped. I love the way that you kind of use those two words in contrast. And we're going to have to wrap up because I don't want this to go too much longer, but I loved the perspective that you brought to life from your military history. And would it be safe to say that we can call you doctor? I mean, you're a doctorate.
Yes.
You have your doctor. I mean, you're the first doctor on my show. This is so exciting. So, Dr. Robyn, thank you so much for bringing your light, your brilliance, your badassness to who you are in the world, for serving our country, for being the mom for these kids, the perfect mom for these kids. And thank you just for sharing so authentically with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me and letting me give a little insight into my world.
Yes. Well, it was a gift to us. So we will see everybody on the next episode. Oh, hey there. One last thing before we wrap up this episode in its entirety. Just like Robyn said in her last point, seek help when you need it. I want you to consider what's stopping you from reaching out today. Whether it's to me, whether it's to a new therapist, whether it's to a friend that you just want to understand you better. I want you just to think of that. What is it that's stopping you from taking that next smallest action? Sometimes in our head, we build things up to be really hard and complex. I know this happens to everybody I know all the time. And so I wanted you just to think today, this can be so simple. Let me make it easy for you. One thing that you can do is just to click on the show notes of this episode and to then schedule a conversation, a consult. I know what it's like to listen to a podcast over and over again and have invitations over and over again and be like, yeah, one day. Yeah, I want that, but I'm going to get there. I'm not quite ready. I totally get it. So I just want you to pay attention. Like, what's stopping you? So whatever that thing might be, maybe it's you don't have enough time. Maybe you're afraid it's going to be uncomfortable. It could be a lot of different things. Maybe you think, yeah, I'm pretty good and I don't really need help. That's totally fine. But if you think, gosh, I actually do want to, but I'm just a little bit hesitant because of this. Well, my invitation is to move through that uncomfortable feeling. That's kind of what I'm all about. And to reach out. It's only a conversation. And as you know, I am currently filling the next cohort of my group coaching program. This is a small community-based group coaching program where you'll both receive coaching, but also the power of community and connection and people that really get you. They're going to hold you, not just to stay where you are though, but they're going to hold you and inspire you and invite you to grow beyond where you're currently stuck. And just like all of our friends in the military, they don't go in alone. I'm inviting you to not stay alone. So go ahead and click on the show notes to find that link to reach out to schedule something. And you can always find me easily on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.